after she left, see, then I didn't come to Salt Lake. So I wasn't around when Frances was much, when she got into her teen years. And then she married, of course. And I won't mention names, but I didn't get along with her husband very well. So we just, you know, we were always friendly, but never close until after Doug died. Frances and I became very, very close and had good trips together.
You're going to tell about the trip on the cruise? When you and Frances went on that cruise and had the room together.
Oh yes, we had more fun than a bag of monkeys. Every trip we had was really fun. We had a good time. Our first one was in 1973, 3 months after Joe died. 4 months. And that's when we went to Canada. And the first night we stayed inside of Canada, and you know, all the Waterton.
Did you go to Waterton?
We stayed in a big hotel. It was an old-fashioned hotel. Some king had lived in it years ago. And we went to bed, and of course we was giggling all the time. And it was a nice hotel, you know, but it was old, clean as a pin. Well, she went in and took her shower, and then, no, she took her shower first. No, I'll have to correct it, because I don't drive with the story unless I do. I took my shower first, and I come in and got in bed, and she took hers, and the tap from the shower broke loose, come off some way, and neither one of us knew how to fix it. And here the water was running, you know. I don't know why we couldn't turn it off, but we couldn't turn it off. She finally had to call somebody from downstairs to come turn it off. Well, we got into bed, and of course we was giggling about that, but as soon as Frances hit the pillow, she snored till the roof just went up and down, up and down, up and down. And I lay there and I laughed, and I'd never slept in the same room with her since I was at home years ago. And here's that snoring, and I started to laugh, and finally it just burst right out loud, and it woke her. And we laid there like that. Every time she closed her eyes, she snored. Oh, but she snored every night she was gone. But that was our first tour. And then we went to, the next tour was the Mormon tour. And that was back to the Hill Cumorah. Now we saw everything and really enjoyed every bit of it. But the strange thing, we was the only ones that weren't very active, you know. So church was held on the bus all the way. And on where it come Fast Sunday, sacrament meeting was held, the whole bit. And, you know, we just, Frances had been active in her day. I had years ago, but it had been so long ago. But we could always find something to laugh about. But we'd sing along with the hymns, and we sang every morning. There was a hymn sung every morning, prayer said every morning on the whole trip, the Mormon trip. So we didn't, you know, it was a nice trip. We enjoyed it. We saw an awful lot of country and a lot of things that I never expected to see and never will see again. And then our next one was, I guess, the Caribbean. And that was real fun too. But
you're going to tell about her sitting on the edge of the seat in your I can't really remember it, but you said she'd taken a shower or something.
Oh, yeah, that was when we was over at St. Thomas. We stayed in our home, was on the ship, you know, for 7 days and nights. And they just anchored there, and then at each island, you know, and then we'd get off and tour. the island and then go back to the ship at night. That was our headquarters for our meals and sleeping too. But I went upstairs for something on the ship, and we come down off of the and it had rained. When we got off in St. Thomas, it was hotter than blazes, and the sun came out real hot, and it rained, and it was just stifling. You know, the humidity was just terrible. Well, Frances, you know, she was like Alice. You know, she perspired constantly. It just ran off of her all the time. I went upstairs for something, come back, and we always locked the door, you know, and I unlocked the door and went in. Here she was sitting on the stool in front of the dresser without a stitch on. She had come in and she was so warm. She just took everything, her top of her pants, the whole bit, took it off. And I thought, what a sight! There she sat. She was about this broad, you know. Oh my Lord, I laughed until she did too funny. She said I was just too hot to go into the shower. I had to rest her. And she's just sitting there stark naked. She'd come out on the edge of the stool about this far on each side. She had some good life. And then she got sick the night we got home. The morning we got home. Everybody got sick on that. It was a rough night. And gosh, oh me, I didn't notice it at all. I was never not squeamish once. But the last night out, the sea was so rough. You'd hear it splash up against the, what do you call those windows? Yeah. And the water hit that, you know, and you'd rock, you know, and even in bed you moved. But I didn't get sick then, and she didn't either. But they called us into the main lounge to give us our instructions for when we got off and to check in, you know, and when we got to Miami. Well, everybody was sick to their stomach. And they get up, one by one, and strew it across. You didn't dare take a step anywhere, you slid a mile. And all of a sudden, Frances, she was sitting there by me, and all of a sudden she jumped up, and away she went. I didn't follow her. I wasn't sick. I guess it was just about over. And when I got to come out, here she was over. They put barrels everywhere and had plastic bags in them. And that's where everybody vomited, was in these barrels. Well, here was Frances with a bald-headed man over this barrel, just even for Jonah. And both of them just so sick. And she was pale as death, you know. But she came up laughing. Boy, she came up laughing. She couldn't feel sick any longer. But she was all right in a little while. But it was really something. Maybe.
You want to touch on some of the other kids who was
yeah, we started with
Florence.
Now Florence is
Second.
Florence was the next one. Florence did real well in school, and she worked before she left high school. She worked for the Weeder Lumber. She kept books for the Weeder Lumber, and she worked there for her junior year and senior year, and then when she married Fraser Buck, and that was Bill and Bob's dad. And they were just 18 months apart. And then they divorced, and she came to Salt Lake. And she worked for some lawyers then. One of the lawyers was helped her with her divorce and getting her money Potter Fraser. No, I shouldn't say names on there. You know, I could hurt the boys.
It's not going to be
If you don't.
It's not going to be very secretive. Anybody in the family.
Of course, they're all dead,
Everybody
you
knows
know, they
those.
all knew about it, of course, then, I'm sure, but, I wouldn't want to say it hurt Myrtle or anybody. But anyway, she always had a good job. She was very smart, graduated high in her class. I got a picture somewhere of her in her graduation dress. Just where it is right now, I'd have to go through a whole lot to find it. But she divorced him, and then she married Chick. That was after she moved to Salt Lake, of course. And then they had Florence and Janet and Colleen and Charlie. Colleen was the little one that died. I remember when she and Fraser, of course, weren't getting along. Now, Frances was a little closer to this than I was, because she used to tend to Phil and Bob when they, and Florence still, you know, she'd still like to go out and dance. And Fraser was he didn't want to, you know how that works. He didn't want to celebrate him anything. Then they'd have a row, and of course Frances really saw what he did to Florence, and so that she had to go to court. But that was in her own story. So the family's all seen that too, but see, my thought's gone again. Jim went to live with him in Price, didn't you, after Mother died?
After Mother died, they took me down to live with them in Price. This would be from March until the following September, when I came back up here to go to Granite High School. All the while I was there, Florence was still working at the lumber yard there. I can't remember the name of it there, but she was always a very proficient and well-liked employee. Stood at the head of things always. She's very much a businesswoman. I had my association with her there. I had an earlier occasion. I think we recited the fact that Mary and Joe, as they were completing their honeymoon, they insisted upon taking Grandma Thompson and my mother and me, two widows and an orphan. Joe and Mary wanted to share their honeymoon with, and we went to Price as part of this tour, visited the coal camps, and 4 or 5 days of it, I guess. But anyway, I learned where Price was, and I had an affection for the Bill and Bob and Florence, so I had to imitate my older brother Dave, I guess, and went down to Murray one day, and there happened to be an empty freight train, an empty DNRG freight train going along. So Dave would say I grabbed a handful of freight train and climbed into an empty boxcar. They took it down as far as Soldier Summit and shunted this thing off onto a sidetrack, parked the whole string of cars on the sidetrack in late September up on Soldier Summit. There'd been a little skiff of snow, and there was frost every night, and I was nearly freezing to death in this old empty boxcar with nothing but just what I'd left home with. And I remembered as we were riding down on the automobile that there were several beehive-shaped, cone-shaped sand pits up there where they dried sand to sand the railroad, where the DNRG had to switch back to get over the top of the hill. And I remembered that they when the sand was put in, there was a fire built under it to dry the sand. So I went down thinking, boy, this is going to be nice and warm in there, which it truly was. See, that was heaven to climb in there. get out of the cold. Well, this was fine until just about daylight, and I woke up absolutely on fire. My body was just burning. Having seen some old movies about the Second World War or First World War and reading some stories, I knew that I had cooties. I had lice, and I mean I had lice. Went down on the creek, made a little pond with what water was running, big enough for me to kind of take a bath in, and I built a little bonfire, and I went through my clothes and picked these little rascals out and throw them in the fire, and then flushed myself. Finally got in some kind of shape that I could get dressed again, went up on the road. There was no highway, it was dirt road all the way through that canyon, and a coal truck going down to Castle Gate to haul coal. Picked me up, took me to Castle Gate. It'd be about 5 more miles, I guess, into Price. So I walked the rest of the way into Price, went to Florence's back door, and knocked on the door. Well, hello, what are you doing here? Come in, come in. I don't think I'd better, sis. Well, what's the matter? I said, well, I slept in a sandkill last night, and I think I got cooties. You have. Get in the shed there. Get in the shed. And she sent me into a little coal shed, made me strip off. She had built a bonfire under a tub for the water to boil. She put my clothes in there and boiled the bugs dead. And then she called Chick, and he came home with they called it blue ointment. There was no such thing as DDT or any kind of poison for people, but this blue salve was made of a poison blue vitriol, which you smeared on you, and I mean it was blue, and it burned. It had sulfur in it also. But we gave the cure to the cooties, and by this time Florence had my clothes dried and straightened out, and I stayed there a couple of days, and wherever it was I was going to go other than Price, I didn't go. I found her right back to school. But Florence was Florence's ambition, I think, was in the business field, not necessarily as a housemaker. She just was a kind of a lousy.
She went through her house good once a week, and boy, everything was done and done well. But outside of that, it was cluttered. It was never straight.
By the same token, she was an excellent cook, but she used every pot and pan in the house to cook whatever it was, and then that would be in the sink till she could get at it on her day off, unless somebody else got to it.
She didn't learn any of that from our mother, believe me. When our mother cooked, she washed every pan, every spoon, everything she used right after it was through. Was never a mess after she got through with the big meal. So she didn't get that at home.
But Florence had a lot of characteristics of mother. She was very kind, very sweet, very pleasant, but by the same token she could be very firm. Poor Bill caught the devil from her more than once. Bill just didn't know how to conform, or he didn't know how to conform without getting caught.
She died of
pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
She was only sick a few hours. Even myself, Gib got a price of that time.
Well, you said Gib went down with you.
Gib had the car, and they called us, and we went down. And we went through a couple of herds of sheep, and a herd of cattle going down the canyon. You know, just something that, in the first place, they called us, they called the state troopers and had us stop to bring some oxygen tanks. And so here we was driving along, getting along pretty good, and here comes the state police after us, the highway patrolman after us. And Gibbs said, what on earth we got to get stopped for now? And they was the one that was to tell us to go back to the plank there between Springville and Provo. And we got the tanks, and we hauled those with us. But
What's the next one, Russ? You said you wanted that complete list.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the next was Gib.
Oh yeah, people.
Yeah. Gib went to high school in Park City. He lived right at home with us always. He was born in Salt Lake. He's the only one that wasn't born in Park City. Why he was born in Salt Lake, I don't know. He was. But we went all through school. He was two grades ahead of me, I guess. He graduated in what? Your mother Florence graduated in 1913. I guess Gib graduated in 15. Yeah. Because he was in Emma Peterson's class, Emma Thompson's.
Where did he go to dental school?
Denver. And then when he came home from there, when he graduated, he worked for, well, I guess all the time. He'd come home in the summer and work down at the Spiro Tunnel in the mine during the summer for money to go back in the fall. And my thoughts gone again.
He had gotten part of his dental, he had an ambition to become a dentist, but he had gotten part of his dental training by enlisting in the military and assigning as a student in the dental corps. But the war was over before he had to serve any particular military hitch. I think he had to do, well, we have uniforms of both he and Dave did uniform, but I think he didn't have much to do, only to learn to right face and left face. And so
when he came home from Denver, Dave came with him, and they traveled like Dave did, hopped trains and rides as they could get them. That's how they came back from Denver. And he had even a big case, one it was an instrument case they carried with them. Think of that.
Did a hopping the freight to get home.
Yeah, all the way from Denver. But of course he died a very young man too.
Okay, another question. How easy is it to hop a freight train?
Well,
the little boys might be interested in how you did it.
well,
it's got to be moving, mostly.
well,
Not necessarily
not
either.
particular, unless you know they're making up a train. I had some experience at it, not a lot, but 2 or 3 occasions. The one that I described going to Price, and that train was going through Murray down here just so slow that you could walk along with the thing, and the door was open, and even though I was still just a young teenager, I was able to reach up and grab hold of it and vault myself in. That's what you call grabbing a handful of freight train. I guess if it's moving very fast, you would have to be back where you could get hold of the ladders, the mounting ladders, and have a step that you could get on and then swing up onto the coupling.
Sometimes they'd have to climb all the way to the top of the box cars and wait their chance to get down inside if they happened to get inside. Now, going back to Dave, when he was riding the rails, this fellow that he left Park City with, now just where this happened, I don't remember, but anyway, they was hopping a freight train, and he caught it, and Bill didn't, and he never saw Bill again. So he never did know what happened to him. None of us ever did, but maybe he got killed or something, but he was with him, but he didn't make the train, and so Dave just kept on going. So you see, you kind of have to skip around to
Yeah, there's no
get
way
the
to go.
interesting
Yeah.
stuff. We had pictures from Dave when he was working on a ranch in Oklahoma, and that picture should be around someplace. And a little old lady, well, they weren't old, but you know, they seemed old. Farmers, you know, that he stayed with. I guess he was there with them for a couple of years and worked on this ranch with them. He often spoke with them.
Dave told one story which I couldn't authenticate. It's just in my memory by virtue of him talking after he came home one time that somewhere Ken riding the Denver on Rio Grande from out of Grand Junction to come in here, and he was on one of his trips home, Denver or Grand Junction. But the railroad police were starting to pinch down on things. They were a lot of railroad enforcement people were trying to get the hobos off the trains, and had given a group of them a rather bad time, even to the point that they missed one section and finally got on another one. And among the bunch of them who were on the train, they started to talk about these 2 or 3 bulls, as they called them, and the railroad company, who were so inconsistent and inconsiderate that they wouldn't let them ride on an empty freight train. And as they were going up the grade over the DNRG route, which coming from Denver, Grand Junction to here, is a steep climb from that side of the mountain. And those fellows went back and disconnected somehow 2 of the cars on the tail end of the line and let them roll back down the hill to get even with them. Of course, what the outcome of that was, I never did know, and but I'm sure it must be authentic, because they wouldn't tell it without any reason to just tell it. But they were angry enough at the bulls that they sabotaged the railroad.
I've just now thought of a couple of lines of that song he used to sing to us when he was home. See if it's gone.
In a summer day, in the midst of May, a burly bum went. Is that right?
In the big rock candy mountains, a jail
a different one.
You can walk right out again as soon as you are in.
That wasn't it. You never change your socks was in it.
Yeah.
And I'm
Big rock candy mountains. You never
So
change
we
your
must have
socks.
learned the version nowadays must be different.
Yeah, probably. You got a newer version, maybe.
Little streams of alcohol.
Yeah, little streams of alcohol trickling down the rocks. You never had to.
There ain't no 10 commandments, and a man can raise a thirst, so I'm gonna go. Where the rain don't fall and where the rain
Don't fall and the wind don't blow.
and the wind don't blow in the Big Rock Candy Mountains.
He used to sing that.
No, it's the Lemonade Stream.
Yeah.
We learned a different version.
Yeah. But he used to sing. We'd get him when he'd come home to sing it to us every time.
Sarah says, where a bum can play for many a day and
I can't remember.
Burl Ives finally popularized that thing. Okay.
That's
all we
where
want to talk
we
about.
were on Gibb, weren't we? Did we get through with Gibb? We all know he became a dental technician and died at the age of 39 years old.
Gibb died at 39.
He set himself up in a dental shop here in Sugar House on the corner of Highland Drive and 21st South, with a man by the name of Monson, Dr. Monson. Gibb had some real skills, particularly in the matter of what was the beginning stages of oral surgery, extractions. He seemed to have a skill at extracting teeth. Times were tough. This was the early 20s, and
He got paid in better.
yeah. He would make a set of teeth or do some other dental work, and then would get paid in peaches or whatever there was, and then take time to distribute these to whoever could afford some sugar to put them up. He early developed a heart trouble that was very severe.
We know how that started, if you want that part of it.
okay.
He went out on the reservation out in Martin at the mountain home and went on a deer hunt in the fall with these big husky Lindsay boys, our cousins. And, you know, he'd never been out and hiked like that, you know. And it was kind of a strenuous trip. It was on a deer hunt. And when he came home, he never had another well day. And that we always felt that was the starting. Well, first he had he had what we call now the flu. Do you remember that first? And then he went on this hunting trip, and it was just a little too much for him. So he never was well after that. He didn't. He just had to work part-time.
Dave was quite heavy. He was.
We're not talking about Dave. We're talking about Gib.
Gib, yes, he was a pretty heavy man, and he was off working in a sedentary occupation, standing by a dental chair, and with his heart condition the way it was. But he did like to get out in the fresh air. Out here in Cottonwood, where we were living, always on a Saturday afternoon there was a ball game. Just a catch-up ball game, and among young adults, men. And Gib was out there one afternoon, and this was after he had some trouble with his heart. He knew his ankles were swelling and all this sort of thing, but he decided to get into the ball game. And about the first time he stood up, got up to bat, he hit a ball that was an easy home run for anyone else. And he started to trot around that base, and trot was about all he could do. And they were everybody was cheering him on, come on Doc, come on Doc, come on Doc. He finally got put out at third base on a sure home run. And this was really the last, from there on in, we went nothing but downhill. I was around for the last week that he was alive. It was a sorrowful thing to see him just suffer the way he did. He couldn't lie down flat. He would choke to death, would choke and his lungs would fill, and so he had to sit up in some upright position or nearly upright and just gasping for breath for days. Man, it was a kind of a blessing when he finally passed away.
And he was only 39 when he passed away.
You did mention about his family, his children.
Did he have, was he married?
Yeah. Well, they had just the three, Frank and Marion and Frank and Karen. They had the three. That's all the children they had. And of course they were all young when he died. And you have to hand it to Marion. She gave them all good education. She went to work, and they all had a good education.
Was Marion always tiny?
Yeah.
Oh, she's that
the
little
one,
tiny one that brought that dress to
Yeah, she brought a dress to Park City, one of the unions, and my
yeah, that's Marion.
And my 10-year-old daughter couldn't get it around her waist.
Yeah, that belonged to her grandmother.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she was a tiny.
She was always, she was little. Gib towered over her, and he could.
After Mother died, and I was I was an orphan and pretty much alone for off and on for a couple of years. But I used to make my way to Sugar House because I like to visit with Gib. Fascinated by the desk work. He had little laboratories next to his chair where he made these wax molds, plaster molds. The making of false teeth in them days was a long drawn out affair, including finally a vulcanizing of rubber in a pressure cooker under high pressure and high heat. But he would make the impression in the mouth and then transfer this to plaster and then to wax to form the shape of the teeth, and even set the teeth in the wax. And then the vulcanizing process dissolved the wax and replaced it with the vulcanized rubber, kind of a long drawn out thing. And I think you could get a full set of teeth for about $25 one of his regular bits of income that he was the dentist for the state penitentiary when it was up on 21st South. up here, so that any of the convicts had to have dental work, they would be escorted down to Gibbs' office, and he would do whatever needed to be done. I was in his office one day when they brought in a huge big black man, and I mean a big one and a black one. He was just huge, and he was almost intimidating when he walked into Gibbs' office, and as large as Gibb was, he seemed small to the sight of this fellow. Very congenially, he needed a tooth extracted and a big one in their ear, and Gibb told him that it's going to hurt you a little bit. And I'm standing where I could watch this. Well, he got in and he pulled and he did the rotation. And finally he got right up in that big man's lap. He got his full weight where he could just get in that thing. And when it came out, the guy said, "Oh, oh," and stood right straight up and just spilled him on the floor like he was a little boy. Oh, was right. And Gibb kept that tooth around there for ages. That
It was a horse's tooth.
it would have done a horse credit. But he kept it around.
Another story about they used to come in twos, usually down 2 or 3 to and one said to the other, these are the inmates, you know, "What time is it?" And the other guy, this tickled Gibb to death. The other guy says, "What do you want to know for? You're not going anywhere." Gibb, you sure got a kick out of that. Well, I'm next.
Okay, well, we'll skip yours.
You'll skip me.
Yeah.
What else do you want to know?
Okay, now who's...
Here's the next one is Russ. The next one is Russell. And Russell, he just made his own education, didn't he? He got out and earned it.
Yes.
He sure did. He come down here and he'd walk from Sugar House to this college where he really learned his trade.
Did Gibb influence him to go into dentistry?
Well, there may have been some, yes,
it
very
could have
likely.
been.
But
See,
in
Russell
those
was a
days,
technician, you know, and Gibb was the dentist.
the technician end of it was a trade, and you learned it by apprenticeship. You had to work for 2 years for some existing practitioner before you could be certified to be a dental technician.
Wasn't it the Wasatch that he worked
Yes,
for?
Wasatch Lab it was called. And Russell would take odd jobs. He worked in the building trades. He mowed lawns for several of the folks out in Cottonwood. He was a caretaker here and there. He worked for Mrs. Judge for quite a little while. Kept himself, and he in the meantime got married and had the 2 children, so that it was a kind of a struggle for them, I'm sure, with what he could earn and still get in his full stint into the laboratory. And before Gibb died, he was able to do some of Gibb's work for him, some of the setup, as it was called. After he did finally get that technical education, he went on from there and became very, very skillful at it. He had laboratories in Santa Ana and Whittier and Roseburg, Oregon,
Elko, Nevada.
Elko, Nevada, and finally in Las Vegas. And he would build up, he would...
Now, all at the same time?
Oh, no. This was going... The way he
Okay.
would do things was to build up a practice and patch up. He'd make these bins for his plaster and the wax and this sort of thing, saw these out and manufacture them himself, and build up a laboratory that looked like a laboratory, plus buying some supplies. Then build up a clientele of as many dentists as he could service well. Then he would look for someone to buy that setup. People were attempting to buy so that they wouldn't have to go through the long, arduous task that he did. He would sell out, make a little bit of money, then he'd go to the next place and do the same thing over again. And each time he made his move, he did a little bit better. Was capable of making money.
He could have been a wealthy man.
Yeah, easily, but he just didn't. Unfortunately, his marriage was such that there was not any cooperation. I wouldn't judge as to who was most at fault, but it was not a satisfactory thing at all.
I can judge.
The two of them were withholding information from each other, so Russ would make some money and not bother to tell her about it, and go ahead and spend it on something else probably. But in Las Vegas, we were living in Ely at the time. I made many trips down there and would spend time with it, visiting with him. And he had a clientele of dentists who were the tops in the field. And about twice, 3 times a year, he would hold seminars or workshops where he would introduce new techniques and new methods. And his clientele would travel all from Southern California and all over the state of Nevada to come to participate in these clinics that he would be conducting on these things. Just before he died, Ellis and I went to, have to be New York, I guess, for a Lions Club convention. That's when you were playing Cowboys and Indians with Rose. They, well, on this one occasion I went down. It wasn't for that. We'd come back from that, but then I had made another trip down. And Russ balanced his checkbook and put some money together for a deposit, and went over to the bank and made the deposit, and withheld about $50, I think, is what he held back, and then he would go to the gambling places. And this was his taw. If he lost that, he wouldn't draw any more. But if he won it, he'd go on. But the following morning, after this particular occasion, we walked from his house 3, 4, 5 blocks from downtown Las Vegas, where they were living. Went up to his office, and he started reaching in his pockets, and he had crumpled up bills. $10 bills, $20 bills, $50 bills, and piled them up on the desk. And he had a pressing iron that he used with some of these work, and I heated the iron so we could take some of the wrinkles out of these things to stack them up to count them. But I don't remember the exact amount of money, but out of the $50 that he kept in his pocket, I think he deposited $2,500 or $2,700 that he had won. That he played only the racehorse keel game and roulette. And on both games he played the same set of numbers. He never altered. He just never altered. And well, occasionally he would play the large card bingo.
Yeah, is that the card you
put a bean on or slide
they have numbers? No, that's not bingo.
No,
what's the other one?
Keno, that's
Keno,
where
that's the one I'm talking about. I watched him play Keno a lot.
But to finish the story of that $2,700, he again made up a deposit of this thing. He had me go to the bank with it, and I brought him back his deposit slip. He entered it in his checkbook, and then proceeded to write out and paid all of the outstanding bills that he had, including a couple of time contracts for an air conditioner or something that he had in there. Folded it up in his checkbook, put it in the desk drawer, and went on his way. And at the same time, I went back to Ely. I had hitchhiked up there that time. I guess it was when I'd been down there on a fishing trip with Harv Dabbling and the others. But it wasn't only a day or two after that we got a call that he was dead. He died. Oh, maybe
just sitting on his
6 weeks.
Stool,
sitting on his stool, had a massive heart attack.
Over and was
fell
dead.
over on the floor. But I went on down. I don't think you went down with me, Alice. I can't remember that you did.
I don't remember.
And after we had they did hold a little funeral down there.
Yeah, they held a funeral there.
And one of his brothers-in-law and I, Vera, asked us if we'd go up and check out the office to see if there might be some money or whatever there was around that needed to be doing. And I'd remembered to checkbook thing, so I took it out and opened it up, and he had made no entry, no withdrawal, no deposit or anything. You know, the day he paused that money, he knew that he was through. In fact, he told me about that time, I'm all through, and I just poo-pooed. And that was as casually as he said it, I'm all through, brother. He got a long time to live. No way. But that was the for instance in which I was aware of his passing away.
The year he died, he called and wanted us to have a family reunion. And he called me and he said, I'll go as high as $250 for a place to have it. But he said, I want you to have it up, you know, he wanted to be in the mountains somewhere, you know. He didn't, and that's the year we went up to Brunyer, to Alta. It was Alta, wasn't it? The Alta.
Mm-hmm.
At the Wrestler's Lodge. And of course we only had to pay $25 for that for the 3 days we was there. He didn't have to spend that much money, but that's what he offered. But he says, I want it up in the mountains. I want to be up. And Janine and I got in her car and we went up and down the Provo River. We went up all these canyons and we tried everywhere to find a place, and we finally got this one in Russellville. Of course, he came. He was here for that, and then that was in what month? You didn't come out to that?
September, I think it was.
Yes, it was September, because he died in September.
Well, he just barely got home.
Yes, he did. Let's see, he died September 27th, 1954.
Probably Labor Day that they were up there.
Yeah, over Labor Day we were up there.
He called me several times to get me to go, and that was the year that I had been serving as district governor for the Lions Club, and I'll tell you, we were, you two talk about not having money once in a while. We had less than that for a little while after I had tried to live on the high level that I was doing as we were traveling, even though I had some reimbursement for travel and so on. It still took all that I was making in addition. And I just had to beg off. Russ, I just can't do it. The tires are all worn out on my car. Does that sound familiar? We don't have any money in the bank. Well, brother, I want you to come. I really want you to come. And he says, if I sent you $50, would that help? Well, it'd help, Russ, but it still wouldn't put tires on the car and gas to get there and do what we need to do. So I missed that first reunion.
Yep.
And felt sorry for it afterwards, too, because I'm sure that he knew.
I'm sure he knew he was going to die, because he just did. He called and says, we've just got to have a Gwilliam reunion. And he says, he offered what he was going to do and asked us to find a place. He wants to get, well, I want to come back there. I want it back there in the mountains somewhere, he said.
I'm not sure I remember him at all.
No, probably not.
I remember Tom, and that's about it.
He was our red-headed brother.
Didn't he make your teeth, Mother?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, for some reason, I remember you getting up in the middle of the night and putting you in a car. It seems like that's when you went to get your teeth, but getting up in the middle
Am
of
I right? Didn't he make Aunt Nell's first teeth? You pulled them, or had them pulled.
Yes.
And Russ made her first teeth, and that she died with those teeth. They never were. She was happy as she could be with them. That's perfect.
Well, I sure carried his set with her a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until many, many years after it, and after you kids were grown, that I ever saw her with her teeth.
If you ever wanted a good time and be with somebody real pleasant, you'd want to go somewhere with Russ, because he'd show you the time of your life. And money at that time didn't mean a thing, you know. He'd just spend and show you the best time you ever had. Always good-natured. I never saw Russ.
He had another feature that he adapted well with all people. He was no wise religious. He didn't attend church. He left that, as he said, he carried his church in his wife's name.
And she paid her tithing to play in the slot machine, she said.
But Russ spent quite a little time around the bars, and he was so outgoing, so friendly. Everybody knew him. Then Las Vegas wasn't the mad scramble it is now, but whenever he would walk in any place, they would say, "Hello, Russ," or Doc. They called him, "Hello, Doc." "Hi, Doc. How are things going, Doc?"
I don't think there was ever a person that had more friends than he did.
No, but by the same token, with that crowd, he could also associate with a highly professional group, and they would respond to him in just the same way. In fact, look to him for leadership in the professional field. After he died, and I got down there, I don't remember who it was asked me if I would, but there was a couple of places they wanted to go in and tell a bartender or a dealer that Doc was dead, which I did. But in the meantime, the word had gotten around, and when I'd identified myself as Russ's brother, oh gosh, Doc was a great guy. Just everyone.
He always made good friends everywhere.
Yeah, our friends in St. George, the Hensons, knew them when they were in California.
Right. There was another police officer came up there to retire, but I can't remember their name.
I've forgotten too, but
they
were always good friends too. Will you run out of tape?
Almost. Who were his children?
His children was Frank.
Whoop.
I'm mixing now. The Russells was Bob and Jim.
Two boys.
That's Russ's Bob, and
yeah,
that's where we go over and get.
Yeah, that's
I'm Jim's Bob, and this is Jim's Bob's Bob.
Yes.
Went through the wedding line.
Boy, it's always a mix-up. I said, for heaven's sakes, quit having Bobs and Jims.
Yeah, we went over
I have to always refer to him as Russ's Bob and Russ's Jim.
Well, we went over to one of Bob's daughter's wedding, and they didn't really remember me. The kids didn't remember me, and I didn't know them. And I was going down to the line. I'd just say, "Well, I'm Jim's Bob." And Mitch was with me, and just for the fun of it, I said, "This is Jim's Bob's Bob."
Now, who's the next? Who's the next?
That's the one that died.
Okay. And you don't remember her at all?
No. Yes, I do. Do you want me to tell you how I remember? I remember when she died. Now that was in 1904. She was born in February and died in March in 1904. And I can remember that they laid her on a pillow on the chest. See, she'd be just a little tiny baby. And she died with the whooping cough. That's when we all had whooping cough. And they had her laying on a pillow. And I used to talk to Mother about this, and they had pennies on her eyes.
All right.
Yeah. Now that, you never hear tell of anything like that. Now but she died, she did die with the whooping cough.
How did grandmother take death? How did it affect her when...
Do you remember
Your mother, how did she take the death of the child?
Well, I wouldn't remember how she took the death of that child, because I'd be pretty young, you know, but I'm sure it would bother her. I don't even remember the funeral or anything like that, but I do remember seeing her on this chair, on a pillow, and dressed, you know, in her little baby dresses. And, see, she had never... Yeah, she must have been blessed because she had her name. See, now I had a stillborn child, but I couldn't be named, you know, so I didn't have a name. And the next one's Tom. And Tom's got a slew of kids, grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Well, who is his children?
Dale, Dawn, Joanne, wait a minute, Lavon, let's see, Dale, Dawn, Joanne, Lavon, and Connie, and Colleen, and then Connie.
Now, is he as He's the one that they said never spoke a word but did things in that last tape. Is he the one that
Yeah,
built
he's
the
the one.
house?
Oh yes, he did.
We
yeah.
talked quite a bit about him on the
Yes,
other tape.
Christine was Janine was telling us how he, the way he did things. Be mad at what we did. And, yeah, that was Tom. And he was forever more humming. When he worked, do you remember that? He hummed or whistled every minute that he worked. All the time. This was around home. I don't know how he was at his own job, but he always was humming.
Out of my siblings, Tom is the only one which I have much recollection of as a little fellow.
Yeah.
Apparently it was his job to take care of me. He would have to transport me wherever I was being kept while Mother was nursing, whoever was babysitting me, and I suspect that some of the time it would have been to Florence's. But I don't recall, except that I would look forward to him when he'd come home from school to gather me up and take me home. And
The rest of us would be in school.
then it would have been the spring before we moved down here, the summer before we moved down here. Tom got a job working as a teamster, building a section of new road across the flat from Park City to Snyderville. The road had deteriorated. It was awfully swampy, and so several teams of horses with plows would plow the ground, and then the Fresno scrapers would mound it up and make some sort of a roadbed across what would now be where it's north of the golf course in Park City. It's north of the service stations on the corner. But I would go down with him every day, and they'd let me hang on to the horse lines or let me hang on to the Fresno scraper or something just to make me think I was doing something. But the best part of the day was to sit down and help eat lunch. You know, we all had a bag lunch or a can, lunch in a can in those days mostly. And so I would get a portion of the sandwich or the pie or the fruit. And so Tom and I were quite close. Vividly, I remember whenever he carried me, he put me right up on his shoulders to tote me around. Then after Mother died, I became very close to him earlier than that because he played football down at Granite High School. Became an all-state end in his sophomore year at Granite High School and was all-state for the next 2 years beyond that. Great, he was just a small fellow really, 150, 55 pounds, but he made a great reputation for himself as a football player, also a good scholar. A lot of friends there. So during those years I was very close to him. Then after Mother died, when I was living with someone, I was mostly living with Tom and Pauline in the house that the boys built. About where they were.
It's as bad as a grandmother having them up here and going looking for them. I've got the heat turned down so you won't get too hot.
Okay, now we were finishing up telling about Tom.
Uncle Tom.
Let's see, where did we get at?
And Dad was telling a story about Uncle Tom.
Let's see.
We finished the Fresno.
You got the other day all about Tom
Building the
mad
house.
at us for, you know, taking the old linoleum and things out. And did I tell you then about him bringing chickens in my backyard to fertilize my backyard? Oh, I could have killed him that day, but I never said a word. I kept my mouth shut. He brought a whole truckload of chicken manure right out of the coop, you know. Threw it all over my feathers, some feathers that long and that big around. Oh, over my backyard.
Just the droppings.
Oh, boy. But he used to do that to his own, and he had a beautiful lawn. But it didn't seem funny to me. I didn't like it at all. I could smell it.